Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, Jonny Lipsham.
Hello everybody, welcome to this extremely unplanned Songwriting Simplified here at Jonny Lipsham Studios. This was not the plan. I was meant to be doing this over on Jonny's channel, but Jonny is having some technical difficulties with his internet, I think. But hopefully he'll be able to get those sorted out, and if he does, what I will try to do is I will try to actually Skype him into my show. I've not done this before, so it'll be fun to try that out and see if it works. So that's what we will try and do. And I'm just going to make sure that my Skype settings are correct, just in case he does. Let me go and change that back to there. There we go. Alrighty, so let's minimize that. There we go. Alright, so hello everybody and welcome. So what we were going to talk about tonight was we were going to talk about our favorite songwriters. And I was going to kind of go over my little list of favorite songwriters that I have. And then Jonny, I guess, was going to talk about his as well. There's plenty of people in the chat, and I'm going to get to you in just a second. Those of you wondering how I'm feeling dreadful. As was just demonstrated right there. No, I'm very far from fit and well. But I'm here, and I'm here for you guys, because I really missed out on doing my show on Sunday, and was disappointed and sad to not be able to do it, but I was totally flat on my back on Sunday and just couldn't do anything at all. I didn't get out of bed all day. I haven't actually got out of bed until yesterday. Yesterday was the first time I ventured out of my bed and into the studio since I started feeling unwell, which is on Thursday. So yeah, so it's been a rough time, but I have a voice which is better than yesterday where I didn't. It's not my normal voice. It's a little bit quiet. I kind of know how Jonny feels actually quite a bit when my voice goes like this, when I have a cold or flu or something like that, then I actually get a little bit of a glimpse into Jonny's world, except Jonny's world is he's perfectly fine and healthy otherwise. It's just he doesn't have a voice really that much. So I really feel for him in particular when I don't have a voice because I have flu. So, Music to the Motion with $20. Thank you very much for that little donation. I will try and remember to split that with Jonny, because this is his show as much as it is mine. So, I'm hoping that once he gets his internet sorted out, he'll jump over here and he'll jump in the chat. And if he does, and he tells me that his internet is working, then we can do one or two things. Either we can all pile back over to his channel and carry on the show over there, or I will try and Skype him into this show, and we'll kind of see how that works. Using the setup that I have with loopback, it'll be quite interesting to see how that works. It should work. It should work beautifully. I don't have any real reason why it shouldn't, but some funny stuff here. Steve, you are hilarious, my friend. So you lived in Frankfurt at one point, so you were in my future when you lived there. Yeah, I am kind of in your future. If you are in the Central Time area, I am about 6 hours in your future. And I can tell you I have seen the future, and the future is, let me see, it's dark. So in about 6 hours' time, it'll be dark for you guys. And in about 6 hours' time, the sun will be coming up for me. So when you're dark, it'll be nice. It'll be beginning to get nice and bright here. So anyway, enough talking about the weather. So, favorite songwriters, please feel free in the chat to contribute and tell me who your favorite songwriters are. And not just to reel off a list of your favorite songwriters, but why they are your favorites. What is it about their songs that you are drawn to in particular? What is it that makes you want to, buy every record that songwriter releases, for example? So be thinking about those and tapping away furiously in the chat. And I'll try and get to as many of your comments on that as possible. I have not had COVID. That's something that is certainly true. I just have a very nasty flu. This particular one has floored me. Most of the time, if I have a cold or flu, I feel under the weather, but I can pretty much carry on doing what I do. But this one had me in bed with a temperature of 102 degrees Fahrenheit, which is no fun, trust me. And that temperature just wouldn't come down at all. It really only started to come down yesterday morning, and I thought, okay, my temperature is now 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Great! Let's get to work, which is what I did. And somehow I managed to make it through the day yesterday. I don't know how, but I did. All right, so my personal list. Now, you guys are obviously going to say Becker and Fagan. Yes, you'd be right there. They are... I love their songwriting because I grew up listening to them. What is it about their music that I like so much, that I gravitate towards so much? There's several things. One of them is that they have really, really interesting characters in their stories. They are narrative songwriters, so they write kind of stories. And they are really, really, really good at setting a scene, at creating characters, and the particular characters that they seem to gravitate towards are characters where they seem to like celebrate losers, people that we would class as failures, or people who aspire to something that they think is great that really in reality just isn't something really to be aspired to. And so they kind of gravitate towards these characters, like faded hipsters, those kind of characters, and their songs have not only these hilarious characters, but they put these hilarious characters into fascinating settings. Like some of their songs are about business. Like Black Friday, for example, is all about the 1929 Wall Street crash that then led to the Great Depression. And so they decided to take that subject and set it to kind of like this heavy rock kind of bluesy shuffle thing, which I think they obviously thought was hilarious. So there's a lot of humor in their songs. There's a lot of pathos in their songs. So there's the characters, there's the use of language, there's the imagery in their songs, and then you get to the music part. The music part is really, really interesting because the harmony is not necessarily normal for pop songs or even rock songs. You wouldn't necessarily describe them as, rock musicians having aspirations above their station. Or you also would never really describe them as kind of jazz musicians slumming it down into rock music. They actually have created an alloy, an alchemy of rock, pop, jazz, and kind of a film noiric kind of sense of style about their songs. And those are the things that really draw me in. And their songs are performed by world-class musicians, and their harmonic language is definitely kind of the jazz idiom, and yet they like using lots of guitars, which is very much of the rock kind of idiom. And they've kind of joined these things together into, I'm not going to call it fusion, because a lot of people associate jazz fusion with Kenny G, and that kind of stuff, and it really isn't that. It's a different kind of a fusion. So that's kind of what makes them stand out for me, and why I talk about them a lot. But I would also add into that mix, apart from Becker and Fagan, I would also have Lennon and McCartney. And I know that I share that in common with Johnny Gibe. But I would also add Bruce Hornsby, and Billy Joel, because those two guys are not only really good singer-songwriters, who again have really interesting characters in their songs, and particularly Billy Joel has a very clear and distinctive New York sound and New York style about his songs. And he writes a lot about kind of his experience growing up and living there. But the two things that Bruce Hornsby and Billy Joel have in common for me is that they are, on the one hand, you focus on the singer-songwriter, and you kind of forget that these guys, or rather you overlook the fact that these guys have phenomenal piano skills. Billy Joel is an astonishing piano player. He has super piano skills. Bruce Hornsby likewise. And both of them are forged. Again, they have their own unique kind of alloys. Bruce Hornsby, again, has very successfully, in a different way, forged an alloy of straight pop songs and jazz and gospel music blended together, because a lot of his piano style is born out of that kind of New Orleans kind of gospel tradition. And so a lot of that comes out in his piano playing. Billy Joel is a bit more of a kind of straighter ahead rock piano player, but there are strong elements of Mississippi Delta blues and some elements of Chicago blues in his songwriting as well. Again, that kind of style is reflected in his piano playing, but occasionally, there are hit songs of his that have a little bit of a jazz leaning to them, like Just the Way You Are, which is a beautiful song. And I've heard lots of different arrangements of it, done by different artists. I think my favorite cover of Just the Way You Are has got to be by Diana Krall, the Canadian singer, piano player. And she, again, there's another singer who has amazing piano skills. And she had Michael Brecker, the tenor sax genius, play possibly the perfect tenor sax solo on that song. And it's such a brilliantly written song. It's simple, it's romantic, it's lovely, it's pure. And it's got a slight Latin tinge to it. It's a great, really, really great, well-written song. And then, as I said, Bruce Hornsby. Elton John is another favorite songwriter of mine, and I know to some of you that is going to be a surprise. But again, another great piano player who writes fantastic songs with Bernie Taupin. And the two of them are actually a really, really great combination. Because Elton writes really fantastic music, And again, he has a little bit of kind of gospel influence in the way he writes his songs. He likes to use, and this is probably one of his signature sounds, where you kind of have this little plagal cadence here, where you go chord 4 to chord 1, and he does that quite regularly. Oftentimes, he does it to break up the monotony of being on a chord 1 for a long time. So he'll do things like this. So he does that quite a lot, and that's a fairly typical thing that you would hear in an Elton John song. And again, fantastic piano skills that most people completely overlook is the fact that he can do hand independence techniques whilst also singing. And there's not a lot of piano players that can do that. I cannot do that, where I can play one pattern with my left hand, something else improvisational with my right hand, and still sing at the same time. He pulls all of that off with some really quite advanced techniques. And he has a lovely technique at the piano. Very, very correct classical technique at the piano. And yet it's birthed in and is dripping with rock and roll. And he's obviously quite influenced by Little Richard and, you know, people like that. Which is great, because I love that kind of stuff as well. Who else is a favourite of mine? You know, I knew you guys would be surprised by the choice of Elton John amongst my favourite songwriters, because I don't really talk about him. I don't really talk about his music at all very much. But, you know, those songs are really, really good. One of my favourite songs of his is Nikita. Not only did I really like the music video that went with it, but I also liked the story and the narrative and the character that you discover in the song. And it's a really lovely, very pretty, very well written song. Quite simple, not anything particularly flashy that goes on in the song. But there's lots of ear candy in the final production of that song, which is terrific. Who else? Peter Gabriel. Sledgehammer is probably one of the best written songs of the 1980s, in my opinion. Because it's freaking hilarious. It is such a funny song. There is so much comedy in that song, and it's got a heck of a groove. Provided by drummer, great French funk drummer called Manu Katché. And it's just a terrific song, and the horn section in that song is really, really great. There's lots about that song that's really good. The vocal performance, and I think the music video won a whole bunch of awards. It was done by Nick Park. If you've ever seen the Wallace and Gromit films, then you know Nick Park's work, because that's the same guy, the same animator. In fact, doing the Peter Gabriel music video was his big break. And then, you know, the revenue from that allowed him to go and set up his studio, from which he was able to create the Wallace and Gromit characters and write the films and, you know, have this massive series of hits from that film, and from those characters. So, yeah. Peter Gabriel. And I think Peter Gabriel really came into his own as an artist when he left Genesis. Nothing wrong with Genesis. That's not a slight on Genesis, but I think Genesis actually provided a good breeding ground for two really successful solo artists in Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel. Phil Collins is a good songwriter as well. He is, he's a pretty good piano player. He's not on the same level, I don't think, technically, in terms of proficiency at the piano, as Elton John is. But he's pretty good. And the thing that he does is he invests. A lot of Phil Collins' songs are very, very personal, and quite autobiographical. I think the whole No Jacket Required record is pretty much Phil pouring his creativity into a project, and all of his emotion, with his divorce that was going on at the time, he just poured that into that project. And you can tell because, everything that he was experiencing came out in the songs, and the songs are really good. In the Air Tonight is a terrific song, not just for the classic drum fill, although the classic drum fill is something that everybody knows, but the whole song is it's dripping with angst and anger and hurt and heartache. It's a very, very emotional song, quite considerably dark, and I think Phil's vocal performance on it delivers that really, really well. Mostly because he was pouring that darkness that he was experiencing still when he was recording the song. He was still going through the divorce whilst recording that song, which is pretty much all about the whole darn thing. And yeah, great song. Good songwriter. Fairly low down on my list of favorites, but certainly a songwriter that I respect. One other songwriter that I have not mentioned that I absolutely should, because his influence upon me as a songwriter has been massive, and that is Sting. The fantastic lead vocalist and former bass player from The Police. I love his songs. I love his songwriting. He is such a fine craftsman when it comes to songwriting, because he is completely a wordsmith. If you're looking for a way to phrase something in your lyrics and you're stuck, go and read some Sting lyrics, because they will inspire you. Because he is a total master of poetic language, and using various literary devices to make his songs really come to life, really come alive. And he is one of the things he is very, very good at is character development within his songs. And helped by the fact that he has a unique sound. What do all of these songwriters that I have listed off have in common? They all are essentially alchemists musically, because they take different things from different genres and they bring them together and they form their own unique little alloys that makes their songs different than the next person's song. Sting is unique in that he brings a lot of his jazz training from his days on the Newcastle jazz scene, where he was an upright bass player for a lot of years, played in big bands in Newcastle, played in small jazz groups, playing, Charlie Parker tunes, John Coltrane tunes, Miles Davis stuff. That's what he grew up listening to. That's what he grew up playing as a young upcoming bass player. And so there's all of that. Plus there's elements of, ska, reggae, punk, rock, funk. All of those elements are kind of thrown in together, but they're not thrown into his songs haphazardly. It's not like he goes, okay, this song is going to have a bit more of a reggae vibe. This song's going to have a bit more of a punk vibe. No, all of those elements are just there. They are the ingredients that make a Sting song work. If you were to take any element out from one of those songs, they would lose their interest, I think. But yeah, he had a big influence upon me, certainly as a lyrics writer. He had a big influence on me. And for many years, I have had a number of his songs and some of the songs that he wrote with the Police in my set list with my band. And at the time, and I still have the vocal range to be able to sing his songs in his key at his pitch. Sting is a tenor. He has a very high tenor voice, and I've been able to sing up in his register with ease for many years. My voice broke when I was 11, nearly 12 years old, and it didn't really drop much. It dropped a little bit, maybe a major sixth. My voice dropped. Now, obviously, as I get older, I'm finding that I have some more low notes that I never had before. For a long time, I didn't really go very much below middle C. I kind of went down to maybe an F sharp below middle C. But now I'm finding I can stretch down to a C sharp below middle C. And that's kind of almost as low as I can go now. But when I was in my 20s, that was probably about as low as I could go. But I could stretch quite comfortably, up there without any trouble. So that's my list, guys. And I'm going to go and look in the chat now and see what you guys are all talking about. Because I have been talking away and not really looking over. I see Lionel Richie has been mentioned. Yep, there's another great songwriter. Gordon Lightfoot and Harry Chapin, among others, always struck a nerve with their soulful lyrics. Yes, absolutely, I completely agree, Steve. Jeff Lynne, Martin Weeks mentions with the Traveling Wilburys. Yeah, Traveling Wilburys were a great little group, weren't they? My dad is a big fan of them. For sure. And I'm not saying I don't like them, because I do. Let's see. ABBA gets a mention. Bee Gees. Yeah, Bee Gees have been tremendously successful. Now, they're not a songwriting group that I like, personally. I don't like their falsetto sound. To me, it just sounds a little bit screechy. But they have been very successful, and a lot of great musicians have played on their records. Like Staying Alive, the drums, I think, are played by Bernard Purdie, who is the same drummer that played on Steely Dan's Babylon Sisters. And Green Earrings and other Steely Dan songs. Bernard played on a number of those songs. Steve Gadd played on a number of Bee Gees records as well. And of course, Chuck Rainey played a lot of bass with the Bee Gees. I think a lot of people have played with the Bee Gees as session musicians. So I'm not going to poo-poo them at all. Benny and Bjorn from Abba. Yeah, they write very, very good songs. I'm not necessarily a fan of theirs. I appreciate what they do. I don't like their sound. Doesn't really appeal to me at all. But I mean, they are obviously very influenced by quite a lot of different things. There's some classical music in there, classical European music like Rachmaninoff. I hear some of that in their music. They are incredibly European sounding, which is really interesting that they have been successful in the United States, considering how incredibly European pop they sound. They really do. And they write about East Coast American things and East Coast American characters and settings from a European perspective, which is very, very unique. I don't know many songwriting teams that write that way, but they do present an interesting perspective. And of course, they write a lot of their songs. I think they write even 98% of their songs in English, given I think they're Swedish. So there's their choice of words and their phraseology is going to be different than a lot of the songwriters that I'm used to, who are British or American, and will have a particular phraseology that European songwriters writing in English don't have. So that's another interesting avenue of songwriting to explore, is if you are a songwriter and your first language is English, a big challenge would be to write in a different language. And so some of that would require using, translation tools maybe, but also get somebody to help you as well. Somebody who, like, let's say you rather than translating one of your songs from English into French, which wouldn't be too difficult, some aspects of your song might get lost in translation, but try writing a song actually in French directly, or in Spanish, or in German directly, or something like that. And find somebody that you can work with who is a native speaker of that language, who can help you with the phraseology. And then, having crafted your song in that language, then translate it back into English and see kind of how the phraseology works out, having translated it. And you may find that there are some interesting things that come up in the phraseology that you don't expect. And certainly English, when spoken by Europeans as a second language, they will use largely their own grammatical sense from their own native language and impose that on English to some degree, some sense. And it does mean that the phrasing is different, which is why I think it's really interesting that Abba lyrics are very interesting from that point of view. And you do wonder how much is kind of a little bit lost in translation whilst they're working. I know they work predominantly in English, but it's just something interesting to think about, writing from a completely different perspective. But Abba, yeah, that's a good choice. Dancing Queen is a song I really dislike. But, I have in my time played it many times as a professional musician. Eagles is another good choice. The Eagles do write some very, very good songs. They do also write some very pretentious songs, but they do write some very, very good ones too. I think one of my favorite songs of theirs is I like Take It Easy. That's a good song. What's the other song? It's in my head and I can't remember the damn title of it. It'll come to me. I'll try and remember it. Little Feat, as they often broke the rules lyrically. Yeah, that's definitely true. Neil Peart, writing, his songwriting. Yeah, a lot of people don't realize that he's a terrific songwriter. He was. There is much debate about his drumming and where he kind of sits in the kind of league of greatness, in terms of his drumming technique, his abilities, what he could accomplish. I know that Neil was very inspired by Buddy Rich in particular. But that's a different debate for a completely different show, for a completely different channel, more than likely. So I'm not really going to get into Neil Peart, the drummer, versus any other great drummer. But yeah, he wrote some exceedingly good songs with Rush, and very inventive and creative. He had a very, very unique narrative style, which I actually really quite liked. I actually quite liked Rush. I'm not a rock guy by any sense of the imagination, but they were creative and they were inventive and they were trying to push the boundaries, trying to and trying to create music that nobody was really creating very much of. So, so they were definitely a good band. Let's see. I think I've caught up. I think I have caught up. That is definitely an opinion, Steve, that a lot of people hold about Neil. I will say that I do not agree with you from a technical point of view, being that I am a drummer and have been for over 40 years. But I'm not going to say he was a bad drummer, because he wasn't. He was an exceedingly good drummer, but I don't necessarily think that he was the technically best drummer in the business. There are drummers out there who have a lot greater technical fluency than him. That's not to say that he was any less creative. I think he was very creative, and he certainly took extended drum solos to a whole new level that maybe other drummers weren't having the opportunities to do. But, I would say from a purely technical proficiency point of view, that you would have to look at drummers like Dave Weckl, Dennis Chambers, Vinnie Colaiuta, and Steve Smith, and Keith Carlock as drummers that probably have a lot more technical proficiency. And I'm not just talking about bewildering speed. I'm talking about, vocabulary of rudiments and how they apply them on the drum set in a musical way. I think those drummers are probably considerably further ahead of Neil in that respect. But that's not to say that Neil was not a great drummer. He was. And that's not to say that he wasn't really creative, because he absolutely was. And a lot of people took a lot of pleasure in what he did on the drum set. And I'm definitely not going to knock that, for sure. But yeah. That's it. We're done. Steve, you're hilarious, my friend. I love you like a brother, my friend. What's my thoughts on Jamiroquai? When you study their music, the chord changes are complicated, yet it sounds simple. See, Jamiroquai were one of the pioneers of what they called back in the 1990s acid jazz, is what they called it. But really, it was taking the Miles Davis funk fusion style of the late 70s and giving it a 1990s makeover. Everything became slicker, maybe even a little cleaner, not quite so gritty and emotional and dirty as Miles Davis's electric period music was. But they certainly took a lot of those concepts and brought them forward. And there's certainly a lot of Weather Report in their music. If you want to kind of hear some of the foundational sounds of Jamiroquai, go and check out Weather Report's Heavy Weather record, because there is a lot of Jaco Pastorius influence in Stuart Sender's bass playing. The original bass player of Jamiroquai, their new bass player, he's pretty good as well. There is still some of that Jaco Pastorius kind of sound going on there. But yeah, there is a lot of Weather Report kind of sound in Jamiroquai's music. There's a lot of good in Jamiroquai's music. A lot of it. However, there is one flaw in their music that actually really gets under my skin. It is very annoying. And that is that JK their lead vocalist, uses exactly the same 5 notes in every melody of almost every song. Granted, some of those songs will be in maybe a different key, but it's still the same 5 notes. And it's based around this kind of... kind of like around that kind of range, which is essentially a minor pentatonic scale. But that's kind of where it stays. It doesn't really extend very much beyond that. And there's a lot of that kind of, that. That kind of a sound that goes on with a Jamiroquai song. Which would be fine. And certainly, those first couple of records, I was just like, yeah, this is really, really great. And he has a great voice. No doubt about it. But my next question to you about Jamiroquai is the next step up from Jamiroquai is Dirty Loops. If you've never heard of them, go and check them out because they are flipping awesome. Not only are they incredibly talented and prodigious and virtuosic musicians, which they are, but boy, that vocalist, oh my gosh, he has an absolutely outstanding voice. Really, really great voice. And again, similar kind of harmonic palette that Jamiroquai used back in the 1990s, except they've kind of updated it. They made it a little jazzier, whilst keeping the kind of the fusion and kind of funk backbeat to their music. And their cover of I think it's Britney Spears' song "Hit Me," you have to check out that. It is on YouTube, and it has had millions of views for a very, very good reason, because it's an absolute belter. They basically took the original chord changes of that song, and they say they made it dirty. Which means they kind of added passing chords, substitution chords, and extensions to the chords, and took the tempo up maybe a little bit as well. It's an absolute fantastic song. They are a great band, and they are kind of like Jamiroquai, the next level up. Jamiroquai with a lot more jazz chops, and a lot more prodigiousness, if such a word exists. But yeah, Jamiroquai, good band. Good band. Just Bob, no, you can't say that word. That word is banned. I'm kidding. Another good drummer is Rod Morgenstein. Yes, I have met him. He's such a nice bloke. And he's also, like me, he's a left-handed drummer. So we had that in common. And that kind of like, yay, we talked about that for a while. Steve says, by the way, that jazz guitarist playing Stairway to Heaven that you shared today was absolutely hilarious. Yes, it is. It's really, really good. Not just because it's funny, but because whilst it's funny, you are watching somebody play really, really great guitar. At the same time, hang on a minute. Let's see. Anything else in the chat here? Just Bob says you haven't lived until you heard the group Frank Zappa loved, which is called the Shags. Most widely known song is Halloween, by the way they were kids. I don't think I heard any of their stuff. I'm a big Zappa fan. My parents have a few of his records. And so therefore I have listened to them because I listened to everything my parents had. In fact, as soon as CD became available, my parents rebought their entire record collection on CD. Why? Because I was listening to the vinyls so much that I wore out the grooves on most of them. And I said to my parents, hey, it's fine, I've committed your entire record collection to my memory, so what if the grooves collapse on the vinyls? Didn't really think past the fact that they can't actually hear what I can hear. When I was a kid, that didn't really occur to me. But there it is. So yeah, so they rebought their entire record collection on CD, which meant that I couldn't really collapse the grooves or anything like that. I could certainly scratch the CDs, but I would never do that because I always handled, media-like CDs or vinyls with incredible care. And really, the only reason why the grooves collapsed on those vinyls is because I played them so much. And it's just the way it is with vinyl. Every time you play it, every time the needle goes around the grooves, it makes the grooves that little bit deeper. Friction does that, and then the walls of the grooves they fold in on themselves, and then you can't play the record anymore. Music to Motion says, is it only lyrics we can talk about, or wouldn't a chat like this about composers be cool too? A song is a song, lyrics or not? For sure. And I think this would warrant a wide discussion anyway. And perhaps this is something we can talk about again. I think we will. I think what we will do is next week, hopefully Jonny will have his internet sorted out and we can do this show kind of again, but over on his channel. And maybe we can expand it out a little bit. Having talked about songwriters, we can maybe talk about composers as well, because I have a litany of favorite composers, from jazz and classical, and folk as well. So, there's a lot of music that I'm into, by the way. A lot of people think, oh, he's just the jazz guy. No, I'm not just the jazz guy. Jazz is that's my native language, but I have learned to speak many others. So, there you go. And that brings us neatly to the conclusion of tonight's show. What do I think about Alicia Keys? Yeah, I love Alicia Keys. She's another good piano player, by the way. For those of you that aren't really that aware of it. And she's another really talented songwriter. She's got a belter of a singing voice as well. I have a lot of time for her music. Chris Rea. There's another good songwriter that kind of a lot of people are kind of forgotten about, but yeah, good songwriter. I think he was mostly a guitar player, if memory serves. Guitarist, vocalist, I think is mostly what he was. But yeah, Chris Rea is a good songwriter too. Can that one song make you a great songwriter? You know what? The whole concept of one-hit wonder is definitely a subject for a future show. We will do it because it's important. Because there are a lot of songwriters out there who have made a lot of money out of writing only one great song that has gone triple platinum and won Grammys and all sorts. And it's just like, you never hear from them again. They never write another good song again. It's just like, how is it? That one song is so great, and yet everything else they write is complete shite. I don't understand it. We will definitely talk about that. We'll have that as a subject as well. So please email me and remind me that is a subject for a future show for Songwriting Simplified. All right, so on that note, I am going to call it a night there because I need to get back to my bed because I am starting to flag. So I will see you guys hopefully on Sunday. Hopefully I'll be feeling much more like myself, and hopefully I'll have enough energy to do even, a 30-minute show on Sunday. I would like to try and do a 30-minute show on Sunday. I'm amazed that I've lasted out the hour here. But yeah, it has pretty much exhausted me to do this show. So I will see you all hopefully on Sunday. I will put out an announcement ahead of time so you guys all know. All right. Good night, everybody.